Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
This is the moment you dream of as a kid.
You practiced it as a kid thousands and thousands of times, telling yourself it was for this very occasion. To win it all.
Sander with victory at Valhalla. And these guys are not letting it stand. He's in trouble. The big fella, the Gypsy King, is rattled. He's stumbling through the rails. Do you believe it? Do you believe it? He's going. The referee might stop it. Whoa! Fury. He's down. They'll call it a knockdown.
Tie ball game at 105, 3:45 to go. Johnson's left-hand dribble from the elbow. Step back jumper is good. And Dallas has their first lead since it was 42-40.
In the corner, back for Pavelski. Couldn't shoot cleanly. Marchment, where is it? Duchesne, he scores! Who else could it be? Matt Duchesne in Colorado ends the Avalanche season.
Mystic down, bearing down on the outside. Sees the Gray, won't go away. Mystic down, catching freedom, moving down left center of the track. But Wade Lucas has got it. Sees the Gray, wins the breakdown. Oh my!
Good morning. Welcome into Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube from Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill here on the Pillar Exterior stage. I'm Ravi Lulla. No DB this morning. He had some stuff he had to take care of. He will be back tomorrow and should be joining us over the phone at some point this morning as we get through a super busy sports weekend. So it's just going to be me and my guy Shane Schillerberg over there in his little Snoopy house. How you doing this morning, Shane?
It's because I want a mustache like that. That's all. I don't know what you guys are talking about. I just can't grow facial hair like
that. Shane, how was your weekend?
Oh, it was pretty good.
Even though you okay from the abs, you all right?
Yeah, it took a day to get over that, but it was a fairly good season. I mean, for the most part, anyway. And as in with all sports, only one team can finish on a high. So
that's true. You have a lot of disappointed teams at the end of the season.
You have a lot of disappointed teams, and to make it as far as they did with everything that they went through as a team throughout the entire season, I'd say it was probably a plus.
Well, and it was a little rough weekend for the state of Colorado in general. Obviously, you had the Avs losing, and last night you had the Nuggets getting knocked off in the Western Conference semifinals as well.
That second half was not good.
I mean, depends on what side you were on. Could have been real good if you're a Minnesota fan.
That's true. Ant-Man was coming there.
Hey, guys, shout out to our guy at the Hurrdat Sports headquarters, Brandon Tiedemann, big Timberwolves fan. No, Ant-Man is the story and the takeaway from what we saw last night and from the weekend. You know, I've gone through this exercise, and we'll get into a bunch of stuff this morning, but I've gone through this exercise kind of with a couple of our NBA guests and with myself a little mentally throughout the last few weeks about kind of figuring out which young guys in the league, and by young, I mean under 25. So some of those guys have like 6 or 7 years of experience, ironically enough, but which young guys in the league sort of I find the most appealing. And I'd probably go Victor Wembanyama over everybody, but I don't know how far Ant-Man is behind that. There is a certain level of just attitude there that, you know, it's the thing I was thinking about was it's kind of like if Patrick Beverley had any talent. That's sort of what you get with Ant-Man. Patrick Beverley annoys me because he acts like he's that guy, and he barely has been hanging on in the league for 10 years. Ant-Man acts like that, and he actually is that guy. So that's a totally different ball game. I appreciate a little self-awareness, and if you are that guy, you can certainly act like it. And
selfish
Ant-Man. Now, I don't know if I'd go selfish, Shane. Ant-Man really showed out on Sunday night in Game 7. if you haven't gone back and listened to the presser, not to go all DB, big press conference guy on you here, but if you haven't gone back and listened to the press conference with him and Karl Anthony Towns, it genuinely is pretty amusing and worth the listen. There's some good stuff in there, but we've got NBA. We've got our Final Four in the NBA is all set and ready to go. We've got Nebraska has unveiled some new stadium renovation plans that are quite a bit different than our dearly departed Trevor Alberts left us with his stadium renovation plans. So we'll get into that a little bit here because I know people have a lot of really strong feelings about Memorial Stadium and what should be done about it. And I have a rather, I think, unpopular opinion that I think might be the best option. We'll get to that as well. We've got a champion crowned in Omaha this weekend in your Omaha Supernovas. Incredible crowd on Saturday for that championship match against Grand Rapids. Super cool atmosphere. Randomly, I ended up in the same room as Jason Derulo a lot over the weekend, which was a little strange, a little bit surreal there, Shano.
Other than the arena itself, like in like a smaller room?
Yeah, so they had at Let It Fly, they had a get-together after the championship, and Jason, who's I say that like I know him, I don't. He's a co-owner of the team, and so he was there celebrating with the team and with Danny White, the other owner, and a bunch of the staff and everybody else. And then obviously Hurrdat's been very connected in with the Supernovas this year, and so a bunch of the Hurrdat folks were over there as well that were covering the game. It was just strange to kind of look over and see, oh hey, that's it's Jason Derulo right there. I don't. It was a little bit odd.
Yeah, our staff had great coverage of it. So if you missed any of it and want to go back and check it out on Twitter or whatever, certainly do that. It was there was a lot of good stuff there that they covered from that event.
Yeah, they were incredible. Everybody, especially, I mean, from Kyle and Brandon and Colin and Sam and Sasha, like everybody, Anna, everybody there was doing an incredible job doing their coverage of the Omaha Supernovas. And honestly, it was a super cool moment and a super cool event in general. We were all there they've been there all season. I've been there a lot more recently, but the Wednesday night, the semifinals was incredible. I talked about it on Wednesday morning or Thursday morning back here on the air. But the atmosphere on Saturday was absolutely incredible, and really proud of how Omaha showed out for that type of event on a just on a Saturday afternoon when there was a lot going on. An incredible atmosphere in Omaha. And would you looky there, joining us on the Hurrdat Hotline is my co-host Damon Benning. DB, what's going on, bud?
Oh, hello, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. How's the drive?
Well, we're not quite on the road yet. I feel like I owe you an apology, so I don't want to make a mistake in public and apologize in private, man. So I'm apologizing on the air to you, Ravi. On the air, I'm apologizing.
Looking live.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
No, you're all good, man.
It's been incredible, though. Like, I mean, for people that don't know, basically Saturday morning early, call didn't come to me, so that just lets you know what my pecking order is.
Yeah, I didn't tell anybody what was going on, so you can fill them in.
Oh yeah, so Nebraska calls. Well, Ryan Callahan calls, and he talks to Jay. I guess because she does the academics in the house. Basically says, "Hey, when's graduation?" So, now I don't know this. Keep in mind, she didn't tell me for like 3 hours, so that lets you know right where our relationship is. I can't remember where she was Saturday morning, but she wasn't at home. Again, that doesn't probably sound right either. So this is awesome radio right now. What's going on? It's life. So he's like, "Hey, when do you graduate, or when's graduation officially?" And I think she must have said, "Hey, Sunday at 2. Because we're getting ready for graduation."
Mm-hmm.
Said, "Hey, can you expedite a process to get the paperwork, that the transcripts into admissions. She's probably thinking it's a weekend, but okay, whatever. Why? And she's like, well, Ryan's like, hey, we'd like to have you down Monday. Let's get you started. So I'm sure, knowing her, panic sets in. But in the meantime, Coach Cooper and Coach Gus Felder had already text Caleb. So you're still talking about 8:15 on a Saturday morning, like, hey, let's get you enrolled in pre-session for summer school.
And still nobody's told DB. Is that right?
No, not a thing. Not a thing. So, because I knew Caleb was going to work out at 9, so I hadn't seen him yet, right? So he comes. So she calls about 10:45, and she's like, "Hey," just real ho hum, like
real casual.
Hey, looks like they may want, Caleb down early. It's basically shaving off about a month of training time. Going to take a summer school pre-session class online. I was like, wait, whoa. What are you talking about? Right? Like, I'm dead serious. And so, short story long, I didn't know if Caleb was going to want to go. But I'm like, because it is short notice. Now, physically, it's one thing. It's emotional, right?
Sure.
So,
yeah.
I called him back, and I was like, thanks for sharing. He's like, yeah, I wanted to finish my workout. So I was like,
priorities.
How do you think we're getting there? Like, we're not going to snap our fingers and this thing is like done. Like, Ravi, we haven't shopped for anything.
Yeah.
Like, we figured we had 2 more weeks. His graduation party isn't until Saturday, which he's coming back for, which should be fantastic because it's right there at Hurrdat Sports Bar. So I almost want to invite the public, but I'm like, I should just do it out of spite because he didn't tell me till last minute, but I'm not going to do that. Wouldn't that be something though? Hey, it's free for all. No. So like literally yesterday, now keep in mind, I had to be at Baxter at 12:30. Graduation wasn't until 2. Our principal and our crew is fantastic. So they're competitive. So hour 30, bam, we're pretty much done. So get home at 4 and shopped the whole rest of the time. Like literally.
Yeah.
I didn't even get to use graduation money. I had to almost take out a small loan. Yeah. So, and here I am. So when I first told you Saturday was when he's like, yeah, man, let's do it. I'm ready. Let's go. So that kind of caught me off guard. So I had to call my mom. She cries 2 minutes into the conversation. Like, I'm like, no, it's a good thing they want him. And she's like, yeah, but I said, listen, we're going to write some books. This is just a different chapter. We got to move on. I got to focus. I need your help. Because I can't think, right? I'm like literally panicking. So, short story long, I thought I wanted to do the show and leave at like 10:30. Well, on the way to graduation, Coach Felder texts and he's like, hey, let's get him here at 9:30, meet at the dorms or the suites. Got to get him over to academics at 10. You guys can finish decorating, then we'll bring him back. I was like, wait, we can do what?
I'm sorry, come again?
If I'm lying, listen, if I'm lying, I'm dying. Like, this is exactly how it went down.
So you texted me in like real time because you texted me by like 11 on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm first person I told outside of my mom.
Yeah.
So you know what? I hadn't called my mom yet. I don't want her to call and say I'm fibbing. No, I hadn't called her yet. Because when they told me, I didn't know. Like, you gotta understand, it's a huge turnaround and it's fast. You go from, we still got a couple more grad things to do. We haven't even walked the stage yet. To like he's done, and they gave him the choice. They're like, well, you can commute. We'll do the class online, or you can move tomorrow or Monday.
Yeah.
And this dude was like, man, I'm moving. I was like, all right, cool.
Yeah, that's the part that I like haven't, I have no frame of reference for, right? Is the emotional part of, because like I can understand the logistics. Right. Like
I sent you what he said, right?
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
He basically said, listen, if this was 6 months ago, I would have said, nah, I'll wait another 2.5 weeks. And short story long, you can share it later when I'm not on air. He basically was like, I'm ready. Let's go.
Yeah.
Different mindset. So then we had to really get it in gear because I'm like, we got to move this guy. Like we're like in an hour, we're going to be there. We're moving because they're like, can we get you there at 9:30? I thought we had a little more time. I planned on finishing some shopping this morning. Right? Like, hey, on the way out, we'll grab. No, there's none of that.
Yeah. You're gonna have to grab it if you get to Lincoln.
Yeah. So they ended up calling and they set up his, his red card and, he gets groceries and stuff. So, here we are. We're packing, man.
Yeah. So that's the part of it. Like I said, I have no frame of reference for, right? Either from really his side or your side is kind of the, like, I know the logistics of like, okay, because that's the first thing I thought was like, oh God, that's going to be a nightmare trying to figure out, hey, I thought I had 2 weeks. I've got 2 days and then we're leaving. Right. But the kind of emotional, like I never had to leave early when I was leaving for college. It was just, hey, this is the day, whatever, nothing changed. And that was hard enough. But especially from a parent standpoint, which obviously I don't have, the mentally of like, okay, I've got 2 more weeks before I have to like start this new chapter in my kid's life. And then that gets expedited to, hey, Monday morning, this thing starts. Like I think I texted this to you. Like I don't really have any way to imagine what that is like for you.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing is as you've seen with his body change, and I think they saw it, is, ever since the 1st of March, I mean, he was pretty locked, right? Mm-hmm. Once basketball was done, we've gone to a couple of days of training and, he's eating right. They weighed him last weekend. He's just a shade under, quarter of an inch under 6 foot. He's 200 pounds, 201. Mm-hmm. And he played at 180, 184, 185. So just to look at a guy with muscles is actually kind of weird, but he just I think he's confident. He wants to get in the playbook, and I think he's a little flattered too, right? I mean, what changed, right? Like, why now? And so he's basically, I think I told you, you probably know more. Yeah, you do know more than just about anybody, but we've shaved off like a month of training time almost by starting this morning. So, I mean, he's going to take his first online class today. And I told him I'm not getting any groceries till I get that red card because he gets free money. So we're going to spend his. But you have to use that local area Hy-Vee. They've got a great deal going for their student athletes. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The partnerships that they have and the support staff. Like Kristen, she was at a conference in Kansas City and she called and she got me going and she's like, hey, sorry for the delay. This kind of got everybody like, I don't know if Coach Coop had an epiphany or not, but, and a good thing we're going to get Donovan to go down too. So I was worried he wasn't going to want to come down, but like he's on board. So it's like, let's giddy up, man. Giddy up,
man. So that's
I apologize, Ravi.
No, you're all good. I've done solo shows before. I'll make it. It's all right.
Yeah, who you need to call up now? He's on the way down. He might be emotional. You need to call Knucklehead and get his Minnesota Denver takes and everything else because he's living his best life, watching TV, having celebratory dinner while we're scrambling. So it's like,
who, Micah?
Caleb.
Oh, well, I figured basketball talk. I figured we're going Micah.
Yeah. Well, he's got strong opinions because he's. It's Anthony Edwards' mind. So, of course, Micah likes that because he's so, he thinks he can outwill you. So it's like, look at Ant, man. Yoke is just supposed to be this, that, and the other. Ant willed that team. He has Gobert hitting turnarounds.
I'm pretty sure Ant had nothing to do with that turnaround. Maybe Jesus did, but Ant didn't.
Well, maybe.
No,
maybe.
I said this.
Yeah,
I said this earlier, and I kind of think it's a double standard that I have, but like that same attitude that we love in Ant, I hate in like a Patrick Beverly.
Oh, I know, right? Because that's the self-awareness thing.
Yeah, because you can't back it up.
Right? Yeah, like that's the total self-awareness thing. That's why your response to me, you can explain it later to the listeners if you want, when you said that's some self-awareness right there. See,
Yeah.
that one hit me, and that's the first time I actually kind of paused.
Yeah.
I was like, man, this dummy, like, why would he send that to me? Like, chill out.
I wondered
You know.
why you stopped texting me back.
Well, I mean, we went from making jokes about going to Supernovas to like, wait, you're over here clowning, but you had this phone call in your pocket?
Right.
Well, I was waiting for my rep, and okay, but feel free to share next time.
Gotta finish my workout. You know what I said though, because I'm an idiot. I go, oh man, so Coop wants him to play right away. That's what I said.
Well, he said some funny things on the. I mean, that's between them and the player, but
yeah,
he's definitely excited. I'll tell you that much.
Well, I'll just make some wild speculation because I haven't talked to anybody, so I'm not like betraying any trust or anything. I'm just saying if they got him at like 200, I'm looking like, ooh, that looks like a little kind of Giffordy. Kind of looks like he's got a little Gifford in him.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking field safety all the way, especially if they move Hartzog and you get some of the young guys going that really, I think, can pick it up in a hurry, like a Caleb or Donovan Jones or any of these guys, the young guys, to help fill in maybe some sort of two deep as the season goes on. That would be fantastic. Because remember, I mean, DJ's coming off of running the 4x1. He's got 2 personal bests in 100 and the 200, and he's competitive too, right? I think it's a good time to be a young guy in that program, because if you want it, go get it. And that's probably my favorite thing. If you want, they don't play favorites. They don't owe anybody anything. And not playing favorites is too little leaguish, but you know what I mean? It's like
they don't have preconceived notions about guys.
It's not like you're working with a salary cap, and because you're $6 million committed to this guy, he's got to like that. That's not any of that. Like, let the paramedics sort them out, right? They'll figure it out.
Well, it's like Coach Rule said, right? Hey, we walk down the street and we take what we want.
I hope so. I hope so. Hey, check on me. You check on me about 1 o'clock on my way back. I might not be so jokey and funny, but right now, man, I'm soaking it all in.
For sure.
But again, the craziest 36 hours ever.
Yeah, that seems super chaotic, but again, kind of on brand for the staff too. Of like, hey, we'll figure it out.
So the last text comes from Coach Rule, and he goes, you guys cool with that? Coop wants him to start right now, LOL. And you know how he hits me with the LOL, ... I'm like,
that means like I'm serious. I'm joking, but I'm serious.
That's only funny to the family that isn't like panicking.
But hey,
I told him too. He didn't respond. Weird. I said, that's the second weekend in a row you guys ruined short notice. Yeah, he probably didn't find that funny. Do you think?
Well, hey.
No, he did. He did let me know that I'm messing up his text conversation because I'm on Android.
Well, that's true. We got to work on that too. Hey, if you were sending him anywhere else,
we got to talk to the boss. We got to continue to be good at our job, so I can get a pay raise, and I can go get an apple.
We'll see what we can do there. Hey, do you have like?
I don't mean like Granny Smith either.
Oh, I was thinking more of a Honeycrisp guy myself. You got like,
oh Lord,
you got like 10 minutes.
Another one of you guys.
You got like 10 minutes. We can talk about boxing on the other side of the break.
Yeah, let's get it.
All right, cool. We'll be back with DB coming up.
We will be back. We will be back.
boxing, and these guys are not letting up.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
And these guys are not letting up. Fury's in trouble. The big fella, the Gypsy King, is rattled. He's stumbling into the rise. Do you believe it? Do you believe it? He's going. The referee might stop it. Whoa! Fury, he's down. They'll call it a knockdown.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, here on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, on the Pillar Exterior stage. I'm Ravi Lulla. Joining me now, once again, on the phone is good old DB. Damon, I wanted to talk to you about that boxing match specifically between Usyk and Fury over the weekend because First of all, you're one of the biggest boxing fans that I know. And secondly, I wanted to see how you felt about the knockdowns, the the kind of controversial knockdown call where it looked like Usyk might have knocked out Fury if they don't give him that chance to recover.
Oh yeah. I'm with you. The fight probably, what was that, the 9th round?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that one should have been over. I mean, he was, and the scary thing, and it worked out the way that it should, as Usyk kind of had dominated those middle rounds and had set the pace from the get-go. You know, we talked about him fighting like a welterweight. That's the pace in which he fights, right? Constantly coming forward. And he did, like we talked to Kevin Iole on Friday, even stayed within a little closer range than he and I both thought. We thought we would get inside his length, but he walked him down pretty much the whole fight, which really dictated the pace. I didn't understand the 9th round at all. I thought it was a lot like watching the fight a couple months ago, or was that about a month ago, where I felt like what's his bucket shouldn't have got out of the 7th round either, with the counts that were going on and the generous officiating going on with Garcia and Haney. So it's just, I get it, right? You want to give as you call him, you want to give the Undertaker a chance, because he did appear to rise from the dead against Wilder. But yeah, you were risking somebody getting pretty hurt on a deal like that. And I think his nose is clearly broken, and he took a good shot, and he's fortunate to get a chance to even get that thing to a split decision, which I thought was a little head scratchy as well. I don't see how you got a split out of that, but I mean, the one champ was the one champ, and you got to go get it, and Usyk did enough.
Yeah,
you don't see champ, and I get it. They both have, they both are bringing some hardware to the ring, but you don't typically see those go the champ's way without something decisive having happened, especially after being knocked down. So you could tell, like, stylistically, I think the judges maybe gravitated a little bit more towards Fury's style, but Usyk was much, 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 much more effective.
Yeah, and this is obviously not as big of a concern as the actual damage being done to Fury if he gets injured in that situation. We also run the risk of the wrong guy winning the fight.
I know, and that almost happened, right?
Yeah, which I do care about, and obviously not as much as people's health and safety, but like I do care about the right guy winning, and clearly I thought Usyk was the better fighter.
I think I had 8-4, and you maybe could have talked me into 7-5, but you still had the 10-8 round.
Yeah, you could not talk me into a split. I don't know. Like that's what
I mean. Were you 8-4 or 7? You had to be 7-5 minimum, right?
I was 8-4. I thought it was 8-4 pretty clearly, because I thought that Usyk kind of dictated, like you said, dictated the pace. He dictated the action for most of the fight. And outside
didn't you at some point, didn't you just want Fury to stop and fight?
Yeah,
like
I always want him to just stop and fight.
Like drop your bum, anchor down, and punch. The going backwards the whole fight, and I get it as a counter puncher, and he's crafty, right? He's pretty slick, but I think he joked around a little bit too early, and as my man Matt Verzal's T-shirt would say, he did the FOF. He messed around and got mopped up. So it's like
he fooled around and found out. Yeah.
Listen, he actually has that T-shirt. Like, who does that?
I don't know how you watch that fight and think. I don't know how you watch that fight and score for Fury. I really don't.
I know. You heard the scorecards, and after I showed you what happened a couple weeks ago with the judge or the ring announcer twice reading the card the wrong way.
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute, we could be in the Twilight Zone. Maybe.
I also, I've never been a Tyson Fury guy like that. He's just not my style. Partly because of what you're talking about with him constantly backing up and never really seeming to.
Yeah, you like punching power.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, we talked about this the other day, like whether it's tennis or boxing or whatever. I like bangers. Like, I like guys that sit there and deliver. And Fury's not that guy. And he's kind of an a-hole. Like, not kind of. He's like, he's an enormous a. Like, and I don't love that. Like, the thing after the fight where he's like, hey, I don't want to make excuses, but I think he won because of the war in Ukraine. I'm not here to make excuses, though. It's like, the guy that says, hey, here's an excuse.
Who was worse, Fury or Malone?
Dude, Malone was pretty bad last night, man.
He was awful.
What is he like? I get that. I get frustrated with this with people who are dealing with the media. Maybe it's because we are media, but like, you understand the situation you're in. I get you're frustrated, but you kind of just have to play along with the media game. It's like, hey, I'm going to offer you a prompt.
It's part of the deal. You did cough up a 20-point lead. You think no one's going to ask about it?
Yeah.
I don't know if I don't. So now, full disclosure, I'm not a big how does it make you feel person. Like,
I'm not either.
I don't love those questions. But still, oh wow, I just saw a cardinal literally just flew by me. Do you know what that means, Ravi?
I don't.
That might be the craziest thing. So my mom, I got to tell this quick. This is unbelievable. I may have to call her. So my mom has this big thing with cardinals because my dad loved cardinals.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime she sees a cardinal like land in the yard or something like that, she always tells me that it's a sign, and can you hear him? That it's going to be a good day, and it's been a blessing. And there are 2 cardinals on my tree branch. Maybe today is it's an ice cube moment, Ravi.
There you go. Today was a good day.
I'm definitely not calling her because I had to listen to her.
I'll say you're gonna make her cry again.
Pause on Saturday. I was like, yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. But yeah, Malone, I didn't like the whole how many games have we played. Like, listen, do you want the trade-off? Do you want to know what you can do if you don't want to play meaningful games in June and July in the NBA? Feel free to get bounced in the playoffs and not make it. Like how does that feel? Like, you know, I didn't buy it when LeBron intimated it. I certainly didn't buy it when Golden State. Do you know how many games Golden State's played in the last 5? Yeah, I do. They're good. Like, I mean that happens, right? And it's, you know, Coach Samanji said it before winter conditioning. Listen, I get it, right? We've played to December 1 around this place for however many years. Like, it's just part of it. Like, let's buck up, Buttercup. Basically, like, the alternative is not being very good. So I'll take the risk of being tired to do something that I love to do over and over again versus not getting to do it because I got beat early. You know what I mean? Given the choice, I thought Fury was bad. Malone may have been worse.
Yeah, I did think Malone was worse. I also kind of come to expect it from Fury because that's just sort of who he is. Malone, I don't know. I don't listen to press conferences the way you do, but this seemed unusual for him. Like, he can get a little snarky.
Well, he's been a little surly.
But this was a whole other level of kind of just being, you know, aggressive for no reason. I don't know. Like, if you're in this situation, like you said, like, you want to complain about how many games you're playing. Well, congratulations. You're done in May this year. You got a month off early. And B, you kind of have to understand, like, this is just part of the job, right? Like,
yeah, it is. Right. Yeah. And even Jokic said it, who was a class act. He's like, look, man, over 7 games, you guys are just better than us.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be a whole thing.
You know, I laugh every time I watch Murray struggle with your famous line when you text me the other day. It's like, I don't get it. Like, sometimes he looks like he doesn't even belong in the NBA.
He doesn't. And then there's other times where it looks like he's a world beater.
I know, he's a walking bucket.
And you're just like, what is this guy? Like, I don't even know what to do with him.
Yeah, the degree of difficulty of some shots he takes with those little 1-foot runners and push shots. And it's like, really?
He's got very little margin from error from being like an all-star to being a G League guy. It's wild.
And his style is not real aesthetically pleasing. So It's like, God, that's an ugly shot.
All right, DB, you have a good rest of your day. Tell the family I say hi and get that kid moved down to Lincoln.
Yeah, he's looking dead at me eating a pizza like he does. We don't have things to do, but knock yourself out.
All right, see you, buddy.
All right, buddy.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back.
Yo, Adrian!
You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up hour number one here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. And I want to remind you that your Union Omaha club is going to be back here at home on Wednesday, May 29th. It's the One Means All Community Night. And you can go get tickets at unionomaha.com. They'll be playing Central Valley Fuego FC. That's a 6:30 p.m. start at Werner Park. Again, the One Means All Community Night, May 29th. That's a week from Wednesday. Go get your tickets at unionomaha.com. It's a great time for professional sports here in Omaha as I mentioned earlier the Omaha Supernovas with their championship and the first ever PVF championship over the weekend, a super cool experience. But the thing I wanted to get to that we haven't got to yet, and I appreciate DB calling in to chat with us for a little bit. I know I didn't really want to, get into why he wasn't here unless he felt comfortable with it. So if you missed it, they're taking Caleb down to Lincoln a little bit early. The coaching staff asked that they send him down there and get so that he was able to get going with practice and training about a little bit sooner. And the 2-week difference actually allowed almost an entire month more of training the way the schedule is set up. So
I'll take it.
It's a big opportunity, obviously, for Caleb, but as you heard DB earlier, it's an emotional thing for the family as they thought they had a couple more weeks before they had to send him off to college. So appreciate him being kind of upfront and transparent about that and kind of the difficulties of what it's like to have that timetable moved up on him a little bit. But kind of switching gears here and speaking about timetables, the Nebraska football stadium renovation got a little bit more information, really the first we've heard specifics about the stadium renovation since Troy Dannon took over as the athletic director. And basically what we learned is the Trev Alberts play in the $450 million, that thing is just the way that was laid out, at least in the timing and scope, is just not happening. South Stadium, which was going to be the first major renovation under the original plan, that got scrapped as they don't want to have to demolish that entire end of the stadium and rebuild it and deal with a wind tunnel and all sorts of stuff. The reason given that they're going to work on East and West Stadium is because Troy Dannon said that they could monetize themselves between the donors and the amenities that they can provide. Those seats can basically pay for their own upgrades, where that's not the case in South Stadium. But as we kind of get further down this road, whether it's the original price tag of $450 million that Trev Alberts was throwing out there, whether it's whatever this new plan is going to cost in different phases, I imagine long term it's not going to be any cheaper than that. I start to wonder, and I know this is probably not going to be super popular, but I start to wonder at what point you kind of just have to say, does it make more sense just to build a new stadium? I know there is a ton of history and nostalgia and legacy in Memorial Stadium. I get that. And I get for a lot of people that's more so than it is for me, because most of my Husker memories aren't at Memorial Stadium. I didn't get to go to a ton of games. The only game I got to go to growing up was a spring game. And then I didn't make it to games until actual regular season games until I was in college. It just wasn't really feasible for us at the time. And so most of my Husker memories are either television or radio oriented, depending on how I was consuming the game. So I get that my perspective on Memorial Stadium is a lot different than other people's. I don't have memories of growing up going there with my parents or grandparents or whoever and having it be a family legacy thing. I totally understand. I have a different perspective on this. So I don't want to discount those people that do have those emotional connections. But I was doing some research last night because I'm like, okay, it can't cost that much more to build a stadium than the numbers we're talking about. The original, like I said, the original Trev Alberts number was 450. A lot of people thought by the time it was completed, it was going to be closer to 500 or 600 million. And so I just started looking. I know the NFL stadiums cost in the billions, and there's not a ton of information on this. But from what I could find, college stadiums, and I think Colorado State is one of the most recent ones that was built. And that's only like a 40,000 seat stadium. So we're doing different math here on this. But college stadiums, from what I could find, typically range between about $3,000 to $7,000 per seat, right? So if you're talking about a 70 or 80,000 seat stadium, let's call it 80,000, and you're doing that on the high end at $7,000 per seat, you're at $560 million to build a brand new stadium, which is basically in the range of what we're talking about for a complete renovation to the scale that needs done in Memorial Stadium. And the other thing you have to kind of worry about at a certain point, and I'm not a structural engineer or anything like that, but I have to imagine on a building of that age, if you keep messing around with the structure of it, at some point that no longer becomes viable. That's just my non-engineer brain thinking like, hey, you keep messing with that. At some point, that's not going to go well. I don't know that that makes a ton of sense to continue to pour money into this thing when you could literally build a brand new state-of-the-art. It's not going to be like the Las Vegas Sphere or anything, but you could build a brand new state-of-the-art stadium for about the same amount of money, maybe a little bit more. And listen, if you just come to me and you're like, hey, it's the nostalgia, we're never tearing that thing down, I get it. If that's the reason, I can live with that. But from a practical standpoint, I really don't understand the argument to continue to pour $500 million into Memorial Stadium. And this isn't, I'm being consistent here because I wasn't on the air at the time, but when they were talking about moving on from Rosenblatt, I was okay with that too. And I do have a lot of memories growing up around Rosenblatt, and it's a matter of nostalgia versus practicality. And the practical standpoint is the recruits coming in, for the most part, you've got a lot of in-state kids, but the recruits coming in to play for Nebraska don't have the nostalgia for Memorial Stadium that the fans and maybe some of the coaches or like the emotional connection isn't the same thing there. And if Troy Dannon is being truthful with us that the priorities are how does this help us win and how does this help us continue to develop as a football program, a new stadium makes a lot more sense than spending this amount of money at a 100-year-old stadium that you're not going to be able to fix it all the way. These are always going to be incremental steps unless you're basically just tearing it down one piece at a time and building a whole new stadium anyway. And I understand that it's a tall ask to raise. TK chimes in on the YouTube page, says you can only build a new stadium if they start winning. TK, that's also true of the renovations. That was part of the problem that Trev was having, was that there wasn't money there for the $450 million that he wanted to go through and get all the things that he wanted done with South Stadium and everything like that. He was having trouble fundraising. It got approved by the Board of Regents. It got approved by everybody who needed to get approved. The money wasn't there yet because they hadn't started winning. So I agree that the winning makes the fundraising a hell of a lot easier, but that's going to be true whether it's a renovation project or a new stadium project. I think it's an easier sell, frankly, to some people to say, hey, we're going to have brand new state-of-the-art everything like they do with the new football building, as opposed to saying, hey, we're going to take kind of these half measures. It's still going to cost you $500 million, and we're going to try and do the best we can within this structure and just see what happens and do the best. I understand this is probably not going to happen. To Travis's point, we aren't building a new stadium. That's just silly talk. Listen, I get it's probably not going to happen, but at some point somebody has to say out loud that it probably makes more sense if that's what they did. And I just don't understand why it's not being brought up. Like if it's just like, hey, if they can tear down Yankee Stadium, you could tear down Memorial Stadium. Yankee Stadium is about the most famous stadium in the world. Guess what? They tore it down, built a new one. I get it. Like Yankee Stadium was historic. They could not put the money into it to make it a state-of-the-art place. And TK says you can slow roll renovations without winning. Yeah, but then it ends up costing you way more money and you're only ever taking half measures. Like in order to truly improve the stadium, you're going to have to spend a ton of money at once and figure out how to get that done. That's going to be the same whether it's a large-scale renovation or a brand new stadium. That's going to be the case either way. And I know nobody wants to talk about it, and that's fine. But somebody at some point has to at least consider that maybe it makes more sense to spend that $500 million on a brand new stadium instead of just doing our best with a 100-year-old stadium that is never going to be up to the standard of some of the other places. That's the way it is. Coming up next, we've got Sam McKewon here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Here is the sports editor for the Omaha World-Herald, Sam McKewon.
That's fine.
Sam McKewon.
We're gonna throw the ball, and you just stand back there and throw it where you want to go. That kind of thing.
Sam McKewon.
Are you guys going? Sure.
Now, Sam McKewon.
A 6-0 trail. And Sanderson up the middle past McKay. Evans held up. He gets the windmill at third. He's headed to the plate. And Sanderson comes through again. And it's a 3-run game with the tying run coming up.
Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. I'm Ravi Lulla here at the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill on the Pillar Exterior stage. And I'm joined now by Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Sam, how are you this morning?
I'm pretty good. How are you, Ravi?
Oh, can't complain. Just recovering from kind of a busy sports weekend. How'd you spend your weekend?
I watched the PGA Championship and a little bit of NBA. If we're talking sports, so I love golf, and so that was not a hard course, but it was a good tournament course, and so that was a fun ending. And then I did not watch the Knicks game because I was watching golf, and I didn't really want to watch both of them. So, but I did watch, the Timberwolves, make it to the Western Conference Finals, which is pretty cool, and that was neat. So, a little bit of that. Watched little Adrian Martinez on Saturday night. That was cool. It's good to see him doing well. Everybody, if you were to ask every person who covered Nebraska football, who's basically the best guy that you've covered, Adrian's usually like number 1 or number 2. Like everybody really liked him and respected him and felt for him a little bit. And that guy never had a bad interview, bad presser. Just so any success he has, people here are pretty happy for him.
Yeah, it seems like he's going to get a real shot at the NFL again after this year, I would think. Right, Sam?
I would hope so. Yeah. I mean, I think, he's probably not a starter at this point in the league, but I do think he's somebody who can be a really quality backup and go game. I think that there's guys in the league right now that are good players, but probably don't have as many skill sets as he does. And if he's healthy, he's pretty dangerous. The one thing I'll say about Adrian, he's always a better runner than we gave credit for. He's among the best runners at that position in Husker history. I'm not exaggerating. Like, he was genuinely hard to tackle. Like, nobody wanted to tackle because he was a giant guy. He was 230 pounds, and he could run. And if you go back over his career, you're going to find that Eric Crouch probably had the most runs over 50 yards by perhaps some margin. I mean, he probably led that from the quarterback position. But I'm going to say Adrian's top 2 or 3. And I'm not exaggerating. Tommy had a lot, but Adrian had a ton of long runs. And so, anytime you can get a guy like that who can go and, break off a 50-yard run, in the NFL, you're in field goal range when you do that. So I think he has a role in that league, and I'd love to see him get the chance.
For sure. Sam, let's stay with Nebraska here for a second and talk about the stadium renovation kind of news that we got over the last couple days or so, with Troy Dannon kind of reshaping the way that is going to be rolled out, with East and West getting addressed first and South Stadium maybe to come at a later date. What was your reaction to kind of the change of plans as rolled out by Dannon?
Well, he kind of hinted at it 2 weeks before on the radio, and I was listening to that then. So when we kind of heard, he wants to talk about this direction, my sense was that it was gonna change a little bit, and it is. And I kind of wrote about it today in my rewind, kind of the framework that I'm bringing to that conversation. There are very few athletic directors who ever would have brought the project that Trev Alberts brought it, and to some degree, I thought Trev brought it because of who he is. And, he wanted to get that thing done. And, sort of transform that part of the stadium and create a concourse that went 270 degrees around the stadium, and just remake the whole thing so that the fan experience was way, way better. And I think that was something that, Nebraskans tend to be pretty pragmatic. And so the thought process of, well, so we're going to do this thing and we don't necessarily have the money, and we may have to go ask for public money. And Nebraska doesn't do that for its football program. Its football program is a giant money pig that's supposed to do that for everybody else. And so what Trev was suggesting was actually quite bold, and sort of brash in its own way. Like, yeah, if we're going to ask for public, I think the thought was, we're going to ask for public money. Yes, we are, because this is going to be a great investment going forward, et cetera, et cetera. So it didn't surprise me that Nebraska decided to, take a more pragmatic tack in the process. That doesn't surprise me. I don't think there's any guarantee that South Stadium will be redone. I think that, Nebraska needs to win football games in order to continue to keep the enthusiasm up, and B, it's going to cost even more money if you put it off. And I just don't get the sense that there's a ton of momentum for renovating that and giving the students better seats. And the only way I think that Trev's original vision would have gone forward is if Matt Rule had said, we need to do this thing the way that Trev envisioned it, and I will go out and raise money to get it done that way. And that's just not what Matt Rule did. And I'm not saying he shouldn't. I'm saying that, that's probably the way that it could have happened. But I think Matt Rule is quite focused on making sure that Nebraska is competitive in NIL and in roster management. And it's just becoming increasingly clear to me, Ravi, that, Trey Dannon and Matt Rule kind of work with each other, for each other. They don't Rule. Dannon's not really awesome. So, and that's okay. That's not uncommon. I don't think Greg Byrne was Nick Saban's boss. But Matt Rule's got to win. And to be clear, I think he's going to. But this puts even more stakes on the season. And they have an opportunity this season, and everybody's going to be watching. And it'll be intriguing to see, how it goes.
We're talking with Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Sam, can I make the argument to you that the most pragmatic thing to do, and I understand that there may not be the support for it either spiritually or financially or whatever, but the most pragmatic thing to do may be just to build a new stadium?
Right. So, yeah, that's possible. The challenge with that, Ravi, is they would be building a new stadium on land that wouldn't be controlled by the university. So they'd have to do that either outside of the city, so like on a plot of land. Maybe the university could purchase land and then own the land. That's possible. You can do that. Where would you put it?
Sure.
Where would it be? I'm sure no one from Omaha would complain if it were, right now I'm driving to Omaha. So I am at, let's see, exit 405. So just beyond, I think I'm right out by 56 and where you go to Wahoo. Yeah. So Highway 77. So could they build it out here? Yeah, they could. And they could put a big village around it and do the whole thing. But that would change the nature of the experience. And
sure.
Very few teams have done that. Baylor did that, and they did it. And they're probably the school that did it. Now you can't really. You'd have to build a brand new stadium. Couldn't tear down the current one like Kansas has. So, they'd have to have one concurrent, and all that. Possible. It's going to cost a lot of money. But if you do it, you can kind of shape it and make it whatever you want it to be. And you can put a monetization village around it. You can put the hotels and you can put the fan villages, and you don't have to try to shoehorn that into it's already existing. That's not a terrible idea, but I just wonder if anybody has the whatever to do it. Like, compare that with an amusement park. People who have been to Jerry World know that there's a whole bunch of stuff there. It's not just the stadium. like, how would you package that, and how would you envision it? Would you put a USA Volleyball Training Center there? Like, you'd have to try to bring a whole bunch of things together, and not just the football stadium you use, 7 or 8 times a year.
Sure. Yeah, and the reason I ask is, we look at like the original price tag of the Trev Alberts project, and I have to imagine if you truly modernize Memorial Stadium, it's going to be at least that, if not a few $100 million north of that, and at least at a cost standpoint, to actually modernize or update Memorial Stadium because of the things you have to work around with an old structure like that. From a money standpoint, yeah, it's more upfront than it would be if you kind of roll it out in stages. But from a money standpoint, I don't know that you're talking about a huge amount of difference here.
That's a good point. Yeah. So I think you're probably, it was 450. It would probably be, 700, 800 million. Northwestern's, I think, is 50, and it's going to be smaller than Nebraska would make its stadium. So maybe you're up to $1 billion. But if you do it that way, then maybe you'd be able to say, listen, this is a big project, and we're going to put a bunch of things there, and the public can get its energy and its excitement behind it. Maybe you place it. Now I'm going past Waverly. There's nothing out here. There's very little out here.
Land would be cheap.
There's well, maybe, but yeah, there's there's stuff to do. Like, you could buy the land out here and try to make it work, and build the the interstate infrastructure a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
It'd take a year or two, but create, infrastructure that gets you where you need to go out here. Those are all possibilities. And, somebody's going to have to step up and put a lot of money toward it. And then there probably have to be developers of that area and get something out of it. So, like, there's ways to do that, and it wouldn't. I've heard for years this sort of pipe dream of putting a stadium out on Interstate 80, somewhat, quote unquote, halfway between Lincoln and Omaha, and creating a completely different kind of experience. Simultaneously, there's something special about going to campus.
Sure.
And you'd be taking all that away. Like, it would no longer be a campus event. It would become it's no longer really a full Saturday even. It's more just a football game on a Saturday. So, they'd have to consider all those things. But it may not be the worst idea financially. In some ways, it'd be easier because you don't have to make a bunch of compromises. You can build your vision from scratch.
Well, and I think it would be a kind of microcosm of, it would feel a lot different. It would be a lot different than going to campus on a Saturday, but it would also maybe be sort of ushering in this new era of like, hey, college football is a professional sport. Like, it feels a lot more like a professional sports idea than it does a college campus idea. And maybe I guess maybe that's the point.
For sure. And I think that's absolutely true. Again, that a lot of these places will, and NFL stadiums that pay for themselves a little bit more because you get more home games and there's some other things going on. Nebraska'd have to find a way to pay for it. A,
mm-hmm.
and B, they'd probably have to put a roof on it. So if you put a roof on it, then all of a sudden you're functional all year round, and you can have some other stuff in there. You can have a monster truck rally,
mm-hmm.
On December 18th. You can have, a concert, a big concert, some other things. But, I know there's interest in putting grass at Memorial Stadium. Ravi, it's just a really interesting time, because what I'll say is that I think Nebraska has a football coach who has the ideas and the personality and the leverage
mm-hmm.
to kind of get what he wants and, like, get people on his side too. Like, Bo may have wanted some things, but Bo had a hard time communicating that to everybody because of his personality.
Mm-hmm.
And Rule's got a great personality and a winning one, and he's able to kind of build relationships. He also has a lot of leverage. I think everybody's kind of gotten to the point where it's like, okay, well, Scott Frost didn't work, and so this is the guy, and so if he wants it, we better get it from him. And so he's got some momentum that I think some other coaches at this school haven't had. And so I think he's got an opportunity to, maybe there will be grass in Memorial Stadium, or so maybe he'll get some things that surprise us. And that may not have been true of even Frost. There's just, again, at this point, there's an impression of like, Nebraska got a coach that a lot of people wanted, and if he wanted to go somewhere else, he probably could.
Mm-hmm.
So let's make this guy happen. And so I think Troy Dannon, who is an old school sort of built his career from virtually the very beginning jobs up to this point, he knows, and he's cut from very similar cloth as Rule. And I'm telling you right now, Troy Dannon has built his career on service. In other words, being of service to his coaches.
Mm.
He will be a coach's AD. I don't know that Trev Alberts always was. I think he was to some degree, but I don't think Trev Alberts was always like, the coach's best friend. Sometimes he was the one who was telling the coach something the coach didn't want to hear.
Mm.
I don't know that Dannon will be doing a lot of that. I think he probably built his career on building really good relationships with coaches, and I don't know if there'll be a lot of creative tension in the room. I think there will be we're going to try to get you what you need, and then, go from there. And that's a more traditional setup than we've seen. That practice, honestly. I mean, it's just a traditional setup and not a bad one. I think it's probably a pretty effective one for where Nebraska football is right now.
It certainly seems like Trev Alberts had more of his own, and this word has negative connotations, but I don't necessarily mean it that way. He had more of his own personal agenda of what he was trying to accomplish, where Troy Dannon really seems like he's there, like you said, to sort of service the agenda of Matt Rule more than anything else.
I think that's fair. I would say that the back half of what you said is accurate. I think Trev you could say it was Trev's personal goal, but some of the stuff that he wanted was honestly designed to, thank the fans. There were just moments within his tenure where I think he was just like, the fans haven't gotten a good shake here. They haven't always had a fair deal in the stadium, and how they deserve it. So we're gonna redo this, and we're gonna redo South Stadium and give the students a better place to sit. The students don't. There's a thing that's embedded in Nebraska. They're going to show up because they always show up, and Nebraska fans will show up forever because they'll always show up. And I try to tell people showing up because there's just generations of people where that's what they do. Those generations stop with my generation. They do. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm a late Gen Xer. So I'm 46. I think I'm 46. Sometimes forget. So I'm a very late Gen Xer. And then, my wife is an early millennial. So she's 43, 44. And so that generation is the generation with which it stops. And I just don't think I think most of the power brokers over there are like in the boomer, or they're either, early Gen X or late boomer. I don't think they get it yet. We're about 5 years away. We're about 5 to 7 years away from the fans just being like, you know what? No. And I don't mean for basketball. Basketball, they'll show up because basketball's kind of fun. You're there for 2 hours. You can stuff your face with some food. You get a cup holder. Your kids kind of like it. There's T-shirts being shot into the crowd. You get a seat. People will go because that's a family thing. And they'll start, they go to women's basketball, too. That's what I do with my family. And volleyball's not going anywhere. And baseball's going to stay that way because there's always about 6,000 people that like watching baseball for the sake of watching baseball. I'm talking specifically football. And football's become, on a Saturday, to be able to sit and surround yourself with 3 TVs, bet on all the games you want. If you're a Twitter person, you can watch Twitter. If you're, a chat person, you can do that. You got your own bathroom. You got your own cooler of beers. You got your own snacks. And I'm just telling you, it's about 5 to 7 years away from those people from South Stadium being 2/3 empty. And now they can win and they can fill it up, Ravi, and that's what they need to do. But they're not going to keep coming if the team only wins 5 or 6 games every year because somebody over there thinks that they should. And so I think that's an area where Trev actually was kind of trying to see around the corner and realizing that there's a whole generation of folks. They like the Huskers, but they're not going down there to sit on a seat that's 19 inches wide, and you don't even get beer because out of loyalty. They're not. The subsequent generations after me are not into that kind of loyalty. And so when Dannon was marveling about that on Thursday, I'm like, yes, it is remarkable, and it's waning.
Yeah,
it's not going to be here forever. So I assume they know that, but sometimes I wonder a little bit, and so I guess we're going to find out.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point that I think a lot of people are kind of afraid to say out loud, is that, unless you do have that sort of brush with greatness kind of once a generation, then you do start to lose contact with the things that made Nebraska special a little bit. And so, let's say for whatever reason, they don't have that run of success. I think you're right. I think they are in real danger of losing that undying loyalty. But on the other side of it, if this thing goes the way obviously Matt Rule and company hope it does, and they get into, let's say, a college football playoff in the next 2 or 3 years, how does that change the dynamic of what's going on in Lincoln?
It changes it completely.
You can get whatever you want, right? I mean, at that point, really?
Yeah, I think more fans will start. They'll be engaged at least. I think the fan experience still isn't awesome, but I think you'll get a deeper engagement from those subsequent younger generations that may remember when Nebraska was good when they were like 9, and they want that feeling again, and they want to introduce their kids to it. And so, I think that's coming. I think that if they can win big, that's something that I think that people will feel and go forth with. But again, that means winning. And I think Rule knows that for sure. He knows it, and Dannon does too. And I think their plan is to win big and to restore Nebraska where it needs to be competitively. And in doing that, it will preserve, the fan base. It'll preserve what's special about it and the loyal support. I'm just saying they got about 5 to 7 years of that, where they've got to win in the next 5 to 7 years. This isn't let's do this for another 12 years and trust that everybody will keep coming, and that the same boosters that have been purchasing the season tickets that don't get sold will keep doing that out of the goodness of their own heart, or that when some of those folks no longer do it, that the children they pass the money on to are going to keep doing that. I don't think that. I think Trev was starting to run into that, to be honest with you. He had some people who were really big benefactors, of some UNO projects. Some of those people had passed away and passed on. And I think some of the people who took over those funds, it just wasn't their passion, nor does it have to be. And so I think there was going to be some, one of the things that we had talked about is, well, what's going to be the next generation of donors in Nebraska, and who are they going to be? And not just one group, but like the 10 or 12 people. And I think that's the area that'll just be something worth watching. Like who's going to be the big benefactor going forward? Are there people out there with a bunch of hedge fund money? And some of these schools have hedge funders and tech growth. I don't know how many Nebraska has of that, to be honest with you.
Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Good stuff as always, Sam. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right, take care.
That's Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. More Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We will be back. will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're halfway through the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage, and I want to tell you about our friends at the Team Jack Foundation. TeamJackFoundation.org is where you can get all the information you need on Team Jack. They've got ways to donate directly to their cause. You can also find events and all the projects they're working with currently with the over $12 million they've raised and counting to fight childhood brain cancer. They're looking for better treatments and one day a cure for childhood brain cancer. Go to teamjackfoundation.org to get involved and find out what you can do. Teamjackfoundation.org.
Doesn't even seem like halftime. Time's just flying by.
Halftime.
We're here.
A lot of comments. A lot of people don't love the they don't love the new stadium idea, which is fine. I get that. I knew there was. I mean, anytime you mess with something where people have got a lot of fond memories, there's always going to be a decent amount of pushback, and that's fine. And I'm not even saying that there is a practical way to build a new stadium.
If you don't love it, leave it.
Exactly. And I thought Sam brought up a good point that maybe the best option would be to do something sort of a pro style Jerry's World type deal where it's not downtown. But it very much changes what the experience of going to a Nebraska game is. I get that. And if that's not the direction the university wants to go, I totally understand that. I do think from a financial standpoint, you do have to explore the viability of something like that, because what it's going to cost to truly renovate Memorial Stadium is astronomical, and it's going to be at least half, probably closer to 60 to 70% of the cost of building a new stadium. And at that ratio, you do owe it to yourself to explore what those other options are. Now, Sam did a good job of bringing up sort of the elephant in the room here that unless Nebraska starts winning, none of this is going to be financially viable. Absolutely none of it. Whether it's a new stadium, whether it's large-scale renovations, none of it's going to be possible unless Nebraska starts winning. And I understand that puts an enormous amount of pressure on Matt Rule and company. I don't think that's pressure that they shy away from in any way, shape, or form. And I think they know. I think the reason they are scaling back for now is because they're placing an enormous bet on Coach Rule and his staff being able to turn this thing around and get back to winning. Because to me, instead of going out and fundraising and trying to make this thing happen now, they're saying, hey, give us a year, give us 2 years, and Matt Rule is going to start winning, and then fundraising becomes super easy, right? Nebraska wins 8 games this year, 9 games next year. Fundraising just got a whole lot easier than it is right now coming off of 7 straight non-bowl seasons, right? That becomes a much easier proposition, and people's wallets start opening up in a way that they're certainly not right now. Travis brings up a good point. It's all astronomical. And he's right. Building new or renovations, it's going to be an astronomical price tag. And, you have to weigh what are the things that are important to you, right? If you're trying to build just a state-of-the-art stadium, probably makes more sense to build new rather than try and turn Memorial Stadium into that. If you're trying to maintain the on-campus college football falls in the Saturday atmosphere, then leaving it downtown leaving it down on campus is the way to go. But you really have to figure out what it is you're trying to accomplish. It's the same thing we talk about with whether it's strength and conditioning with Coach Rule, whether it's spring practice with the football team, is if you've got clear-cut objectives to what you're trying to accomplish, then going through and figuring how to get there becomes much easier. And that's been the issue with Nebraska a lot in the past, is there's not really been clear-cut objectives, not in a super specific way, because you go from, hey, we're just trying to, we're trying to win, we're trying to get to a bowl game, or we're trying to, that's too broad. Coach Rule gets so specific with these things, whether it's talking about how, hey, if we can just get off the field on 3rd and 7, we're a dramatically better football team. Or if we can just get back, if we can cut down turnovers by this percentage, then we're a dramatically better football team. All of those things, you have to get super specific into what you want. And Ken on YouTube says on campus is a no-brainer, and maybe it is. But I also think you have to consider what college football is turning into. College football is not the college football the college football the way that we have known it for the last however many years. I know people kind of bemoan all the changes, but it's about to change even more in a way that I don't think many of us are really prepared for. And a pro football type model might make more sense in that scenario. I'm not saying it for sure does. I think it at least requires looking into it at a pretty serious degree. And I know people are like, okay, how do you practice out there and whatever? First of all, you practice at the facility a lot of the time, and it's not like you can't have buses and commute to the state. Like it's not the transportation is not that big of a deal, I promise. That is the smallest obstacle here in figuring out what you want to do. And to me, it's all about figuring out what is the objective. If you want it to feel like college football, then that should be the objective, and you do what you need to make Memorial Stadium the place that it needs to be where it's currently situated. But if the goal is to be financially viable in the new world of college football, I really do think you have to explore other options. And for me, those other options would include what Sam talked about, and basically building a football village somewhere not located on campus. I don't know if it has to be out by Waverly or, I don't think halfway between Omaha and Lincoln makes sense. You probably need that closer to Lincoln, but there's a lot of new developments in Lincoln kind of on the outskirts of the city that I think would be viable locations for a stadium village, if you will. And that, to me, if you're looking for basically a financially independent professional football team, which is what we would be talking about in that scenario, is that has to be an option you explore. I genuinely believe that. But again, that's if your goal, if that's your goal. If it's to make it still feel like college football, then figuring out Memorial Stadium probably makes the most sense.
Having it on campus, I mean, the one thing that you might be kind of forgetting is just the regular student who may be attracted to go to that school because that stuff is available on campus right there. If they live in the dorms, that sort of thing, and everything's kind of just right there. It's just an activity that they can go to relatively easy, and you're going to kind of take that away if it's
and that's kind of the point of
on the outside of town.
That's kind of the point of it being like a college football atmosphere versus having it be more financially viable, right? Because students don't bring that much revenue in for the football program. It's part of the experience. It's part of the whole college life thing, and I get that. And if that's the goal you're trying to maintain, then you're absolutely right. Having it off campus doesn't really make sense. But if you're looking at it from a financial standpoint,
which is the number one thing you're looking at,
and I'm not saying they should be looking at it that way, but I am saying that you at least have to consider it, right? If you're looking at it and you go, hey, we're actually, it's going to cost us a little more up front to do this, but long term, we're going to make way more money in having our own kind of independent football village that we go out and we can sell, seat licenses to. And I know that they've never done it before, but maybe they go out and get some public money for it to help finance it as a multi-purpose site. Like Sam was saying, if they build it in a certain way, you can use it year round or use it for lots of events, not just Nebraska football. That is something like if you're trying to remain financially viable going into this new world of college football, I think that has to be something you consider. And yes, Ken, that does screw over the students. I get that. I understand that.
And I mean, they could have like buses or something to take the students there.
But it's not like they're doing them a ton of favors right now, the way things are currently situated in Memorial Stadium either. I get it's easier to get to, but a lot of students forgo that experience because of the lack of amenities or the, where they're positioned in the stadium or whatever the case is. So it's not like the students.
I mean, you want that student section though, because that's the loudest section.
I mean, I get that it is, but man, the students don't have it great right now. Like that's something that we kind of overlook quite a bit with Nebraska football. TK says, how does revenue sharing on the horizon play into slow rolling? I assume he means slow rolling out renovations. That's a good point as well, TK. We can get more into that as we wrap up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. I'm here riding solo with my guy Shane Schillerberg this morning on the Pillar Exterior stage. Well, I'm on the stage. He's in his Snoopy house over there. You holding things down over there, Shano?
Yep. Me and the little birdie are over here, so we're good. I don't even know what the bird's called, but
what is the bird called in Snoopy?
I don't know.
Oh, it's I want to say Tweety, but that's Looney Tunes. That's okay. We'll figure it out later. The YouTube comments have gotten quite active over the stadium issue, and I get it. I really do. my point is mostly a financial one. That once you cross over the halfway mark of a renovation in terms of how much it costs versus building a new stadium, you are kind of under an obligation at that point to explore a new build. And that's the general rule of thumb. I understand there's other factors there, but strictly financially, that's where you have to start taking those things into consideration. Now, again, it goes back to what you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to accomplish a college football field in the best way possible, then a new build somewhere other than on campus doesn't work. And the idea is dead there. And that's fine if that's what you're trying to accomplish. But if you're trying to accomplish financial viability in this new world of college football, where you're going to have a, whatever that number is, they keep saying a $20 million line item to pay for athletes directly from the university, whether it's NIL money, whether it's trying to make sure that your athletic department creates revenue in as many ways as possible, whether that's just outside of just TV rights and everything like that, and selling tickets. New stadiums can generate revenue in a way that a renovated Memorial Stadium simply can't, whether it's additional events the way that Sam was talking about, or putting together a sort of university-owned village, which is sort of what Trev was talking about in part of his $450 million renovation idea, was putting hotels and restaurants and things like that around it as well to help bring in additional revenue for the university. What's up, Shane?
Well, the other nice thing is if you did have a new stadium, it would be more set up for the modern game, the way it's played on TV, at least the look and the cameras and all that kind of stuff, and then like the press box and everything around there. I mean, when you look at it that way.
And the big bugaboo is
and you probably get better game selection too,
and beer sales. I mean,
especially to start with.
Yeah, 100%
on TV.
The other thing is you'd have the infrastructure for more modern concessions. You'd have actual, restrooms in a proper ratio to the number of people that you have there. Like, there's a lot of benefits to building a new stadium that are going to be hard to accomplish at Memorial Stadium. And I know that people are like, okay, what about the students? And what about this? And what about that? And I get it. I really do. But if you're talking, and you have to, like Sam said, you kind of have to take college football and view it in a totally different realm than you do college baseball, the basketball teams, because somebody asked about Pinnacle Bank and that kind of stuff. That's all still down there. I get that. I'm not saying that part of town would go away. You'd still have the baseball stadium, basketball stadium. You'd still have Haymarket Park down there, and that could still be a viable sort of entertainment district without the football stadium. In fact, you probably would build a bunch of other things up where the football stadium used to be to kind of make it even more of a year-round entertainment district, because that would be pretty valuable land there. But the issue is college football is turning into such a different thing than the rest of college athletics. And because of that, I do think you have to start thinking outside the box in terms of the viability of the stadium. And maybe renovating Memorial Stadium is the thing that makes the most sense. I don't think we can go into that as an absolute given, considering all of the other factors at play in the way college football is being transformed over the last few years, and probably for a few more before the dust finally settles and this thing reaches its final form. If you've got thoughts, you can either join in on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, as a lot of listeners have already, or you can give us a call at 888-638-4876. I did want to get into something else, Nebraska football related, because Matt Rule plays a huge part in this whole discussion, and not just stadium stuff, but the future of Nebraska football in general. And I thought that's what I'm excited about too, Coach. I do think it's interesting, the dynamic that Sam laid out between Nebraska as the athletic director position and Nebraska, the head football coach position, because it really does seem like Troy Dannon kind of works for Matt Rule, not the other way around. And with the previous dynamic with Trev Alberts, it really felt reversed. And maybe it was more of a partnership than like Matt Rule works for Trev Alberts. But now Matt Rule definitely is sort of the driving force in that athletic department as much as anyone. I mean, John Cook, I'm sure, has quite a bit of influence as well. But it certainly doesn't seem like he has a lot of people that he has to answer to, which if you trust him and his judgment, that's a great thing. And we have no reason not to at this point. But I will say it was interesting. I was looking at CBS Sports. They did a ranking of the top 68 coaches. So the Power 4 coaches, basically, they ranked from 68 to 1. And I was really interested to find Matt Rule at number 29, which is, I think, considering where Nebraska was last year, is a pretty good spot. But I'm kind of looking at the coaches around him, and I don't know, it's hard for me to sit here and look at a Matt Campbell who is at Iowa State, and I'm a huge Matt Campbell guy. I know a lot of people soured on him over the recent years, but that's a guy that I've been a big fan of for a long time. I think Iowa State's an impossibly hard job, and he's done a really, really good job there. That's a guy that before Matt Rule got fired at Carolina, I thought Matt Campbell would have been a good fit at Nebraska, and I still think he's a really good football coach. But I'm not sure I would take Matt Campbell over Matt Rule. You look at Sonny Dykes at TCU. That's a guy that had that really nice run in the national championship game, and that's awesome. I don't totally know long-term how I feel about Sonny Dykes as a head coach. They obviously really struggled last year, and he has kind of a mixed bag in terms of his overall success as a head coach. He's a little bit older than Matt Rule as well. And, it doesn't, I just look at a bunch of these guys that they've got ranked ahead of him. And I get that, they didn't have a winning season last year in Nebraska. So it's easy to look at it and be like, that's not necessarily what they want to do there. But, Sonny Dykes is a guy that struggled at California. He did really well, or pretty well, considering SMU, and then he had the really nice season at TCU. But I mean, they were 5-7 last year too, same record as Nebraska. And you take out that national championship run for TCU, and the rest of Sonny Dykes' overall record doesn't really strike me as overwhelming. That's one that I kind of struggle with a little bit, and I don't know. It's a super interesting exercise to go through, because you'll have guys like, for instance, Lane Kiffin's number 14 on this list, and I don't think there's 13 coaches I would take over Lane Kiffin in the country. It's not a big number. I'm a pretty big Lane Kiffin fan, and what do you do with Dabo? I don't know what you do with Dabo Swinney. Obviously, he's got the success. I also think he's really ill-equipped for the new world of college football. I don't know. He came out in an interview a couple days ago where he's talking about, they brought up the point that he's the only ACC school not to take on any transfers in this past cycle. And, after kind of making a joke about, it's like, well, it's not that we did it on purpose. And, we went after some guys and they didn't really reciprocate, which he's been pretty vocal about not really liking transfers. So I'm not sure, I'm sure that has a factor with guys not necessarily wanting to go there. But then he makes one of his corny Dabo Swinney jokes about, well, we got a whole class of guys transferring from high school. It's like, well, that's not really how that works, Dabo. You need to stop being a weirdo for a few seconds here. But I don't know that, I don't know that Dabo's cut out for the new world of college football. We'll see as Clemson kind of moves on. But, I love Kyle Whittingham, but I don't know what Utah's future looks like. It's a super interesting list. Go to CBS Sports if you're curious about it. I certainly wouldn't take James Franklin over a guy like Lane Kiffin, but maybe that's a blind spot for me with my love for Kiffin. But some of the other guys around Matt Rule on the list, you got Willie Fritz at 26 at Houston. Big Willie Fritz fan. He's had a really good career at a bunch of different stops. Gus Malzahn is at 28, one spot ahead of Matt Rule as well. I'm not sure I would take Gus Malzahn. Actually, I definitely would not take Gus Malzahn over Matt Rule, but maybe that's part of my Matt Rule bias showing a little bit here as well. And then you got an interesting one, Jed Fish at 31 at Washington. He is the new Washington coach, took over for Kalen DeBoer. He did a good job at Arizona, but man, that's a short track record to put him that high. I will say the best ranking on this list is that Deion Sanders is way, way down there in the 60s where he belongs for his trash program. And I'm going to continue to ride that train. Hopefully 61 is where Deion Sanders is. And honestly, that might be about 7 spots too high.
By the way, the amazing Daniel and Josh both remind us that it's Woodstock is Snoopy's bird.
Oh, that's right. I was trying to figure out why they were saying Woodstock in the chat. I was like, are we still talking about stadiums? I was like, I thought that was just in a field. Anyway, we'll be back with more Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and for this third hour, we're on KFOR in Lincoln. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube as well. And you can find me over the weekend at the Warhorse Sportsbook. You've got the casino in Lincoln or Horseman's Park in Omaha, and it's the best place to place your sports bets in the state of Nebraska. You had a bunch of stuff going on this weekend. PGA Championship, you had the Preakness, you had NBA, NHL. Again, tough weekend for our Colorado fans out there.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, it's no surprise. I know Shano wasn't feeling the Avs in Game 7, and that played out. But
back in the day,
to this day, we will.
To this day,
we've got plenty of stuff though that you can try and win big on throughout the rest of this week and into the weekend as well. So make sure you get over to Warhorse Sportsbook. And if you've got any questions, go to warhorsecasino.com/sportsbook for a full list of details and house rules. That's Warhorse Sportsbook. No bets, no glory. Moving on from the stadium thing a little bit here. There was obviously a super busy sports weekend. But last week, I wanted to get back a little bit because we didn't have a chance to talk about this while it was going on. But last week you had the NBA draft combine with Baylor Shireman and Trey Alexander from Creighton out there. Hunter Salas from Omaha was out there as well. But kind of the consensus winner from this NBA draft combine was Baylor Shireman, who, explored the NBA a little bit the last couple years. The first year when he was transferring from SDSU to Creighton, and then kind of didn't go through the whole process, but tested the waters a little bit last year as well. And instead decided to come back, worked on his body, and really raised his stock in a way that, frankly, I didn't think was possible with his level of experience. Typically, when you get to be 22, 23, 24 years old, the NBA has a pretty set in stone view on who you are as a player and as a person. And Baylor was kind of able to buck that trend a little bit and really came away from the NBA draft combine. A lot of people think he's a first rounder now, where he was probably early second at best coming into that thing. I know there was a couple people that were kind of flirting with him as a first rounder in their mock drafts before that, but it's to the point now that I think there's a pretty good chance Baylor Shireman gets drafted in the first round, somewhere in that 20 to 30 range, which is a huge improvement for him. He would have been a second rounder at best last year if he had left, maybe an undrafted free agent, and was probably an early second rounder before the draft combine, somewhere in that 30 to 45 spot. I think a contender is going to draft him in the back end of the first round this year and have him be kind of one of those contributing, probably bench pieces to a team. And I think that's the really appealing thing about Baylor for a lot of teams is he comes in with an NBA-ready skill. To me, and I talked about this with Andrew Rogers on his podcast, Rogers Rules. Speaking of which, shout out to Andrew. He just got married on Saturday. Congratulations to him and Ashley getting hitched. I was disappointed I wasn't able to be down there, but we had the Supernovas over the weekend, so wasn't able to make it. But shout out to Andrew. I was on his podcast last week, there, and the biggest difference to me between Trey and Baylor as NBA prospects is Baylor has an NBA-ready skill right now in his shooting, and at 6'7", even though he's not an incredible athlete, I think he's a better athlete than he gets credit for. He's probably about average in terms of athleticism, but he's got an NBA-ready skill, and at 6'7", he's going to be able to get his shot off more often than not. And when you're looking at the back half of the first round, that's something that becomes really important is, okay, can you do anything for me right away? Sometimes in the lottery and the higher picks, you're just projecting, right? You're like, oh, we like this guy's frame. We like his athleticism. We're going to take a chance on being able to teach him how to play basketball, kind of the Coach Rule model, if you will, in terms of development and what they look for. But with the last half of the second round, you get into the guys that are contenders and that they want to win championships within the next year or two. They want guys that can contribute right away. They don't really have time for projects. And you could make an argument that was one of the biggest mistakes that, and I have made that argument and will continue to make that argument, that one of the biggest mistakes that the Golden State Warriors did was they tried to take flyers on guys that were projects, whether it was James Wiseman or Jonathan Kuminga, or even like a Jordan Poole was kind of a project in the late rounds there, when they should have been going for guys that could help them out right away to maximize that Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green championship window. But usually when you get in the back half of the first round, they want guys that they can get on the cheap, because most teams that are contenders are in luxury cap, salary cap, luxury tax hell, and they need cheap guys that they can get to contribute. And the easiest way to do that is through the draft or through vet minimums. But with vet minimums, a lot of times you don't know what you're getting with a guy on kind of the last legs of his career. So a lot of teams try and do that through the draft. Baylor can be that guy for a contending team, because not only does he have the NBA ready skill as a shooter, but I genuinely think his passing ability would fit really well into some of these teams that are left in the Final Four of the NBA playoffs here. I look at a team like the Dallas Mavericks, for instance, where you look at their ball movement, you look at their shooting ability. He would fit in nicely with their kind of offensive system and with his passing ability and his shooting ability, and you wouldn't miss much. And he would actually kind of facilitate their offense in a way that I think would be super interesting. Or you look at a team like Oklahoma City that has a ton of draft capital and probably needs some more veteran ready-to-go presences rather than continuing to take on young assets. They probably need some guys to get over the hump that can play right away. And I think Baylor Scheierman could be a guy like that. That's where it gets super interesting for him. And I think he does get I do think he'll get drafted at the end of the first round to a contender and hopefully is able to contribute to them right away. Whereas like a Trey Alexander is pretty good at a lot of things, doesn't really have an elite skill set in any one area. You look at his size, he's 6'2", 6'3", doesn't really have true two-guard size, doesn't really have true point guard skill set, kind of stuck in that tweener range where it can be difficult. Those tweener guards are the guys that find it really the most difficult to make the transition into the NBA if they don't have an elite skill to fall back on. You know, that's not that these guys are anywhere in the same neighborhood, but you kind of heard some of the same things about like a Steph Curry when he came out, but Curry was an elite shooter already. He was always going to be an elite shooter. Trey doesn't really have, especially with the way he shot the ball this past year, doesn't really have that same skill set to fall back on that a guy like Steph Curry does. And so I think that's going to be the tough sell for Trey Alexander. I think he's probably a second round or an undrafted free agent type guy. And he will be, I really think it'll be a situation where he probably plays most of his professional basketball overseas. And that's not a knock on him or anything. That's a super high level of basketball. Unless something changes, though, I just don't know. I don't know that he makes sense in a NBA type role with his current size and skill set. But I also didn't think Jalen Brunson would turn into a MVP candidate. So certainly things can change in a heartbeat in the NBA. Guys like Brunson or Fred VanVleet, for instance, are kind of these outliers. That it's certainly not impossible to go from where they were to where they've become. It's just you're obviously
no big deal.
Yeah, I mean it is a pretty big deal, Shano. Jalen Brunson just went from like, hey, pretty nice second round backup point guard to, trying to lead the Knicks to an Eastern Conference Finals.
It's exciting.
They didn't quite make it. Gotta send out condolences to all my Knicks fans out there.
You have a lot of them.
I actually only know one. I think that's a Knicks fan. I think it's just I've got one in my life, and I will say Knicks fans are,
but they're very prominent.
Yeah, they're like very passionate. I will say Knicks fans are pretty annoying. I don't know if they're as bad as like Cowboys fans are bad. Cowboys fans are really bad. Knicks fans are pretty annoying, though.
Cowboy, I mean, there's a little bit of a difference there considering, championships on one team versus on the other team, not so much.
Kind of, but they're both a very proud franchise that gets way too much attention that hasn't won in a super long time.
Well, and it's part of the city too. I mean, New York is it's New York, and they just think they're bigger than most other towns.
They are,
and it's part of where they play at too, at the Garden, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it kind of all goes together there.
Speaking of which, they did build a new Madison Square Garden too. So I'm just saying, you can build new stadiums. It's okay, guys.
That's totally on me.
But no, the Knicks fans, I know they were struggling after the Pacers kind of put it on them a little bit yesterday. But it's an interesting group of Final Four teams here in the NBA. Of Celtics Pacers starts tomorrow night, and then you've got Mavericks Timberwolves starts Wednesday night. We'll talk to an NBA guy tomorrow, right, Jano?
Yeah, we've got our NBA guy tomorrow, so
we'll talk.
Looking forward to that.
We'll talk a little.
We hadn't had him on for a minute. He's a good guest.
Good, I like it. We will. We'll talk more NBA tomorrow. But I was thinking about this. I was thinking about this topic a lot the last week because we were, we were discussing all the different TV deals that are coming through with, the NFL schedule release and. Okay, you're going to have Netflix to watch the Christmas Day games. And you got to have Prime to watch the Thursday night games. And, obviously you got to have your regular television, your Fox and CBS and NBC. And then if you want a Sunday ticket, you got to pay for that. And it's becoming sort of expensive just to even watch the NFL on TV. And I think somebody did the math and said, if you want to watch every NFL game, it's going to cost you like $120 a month in services. And so that's a good amount. Now, the large portion of that, like 80 of that is NFL Sunday ticket. But even for your main games, you're talking about $40-$50 a month for just the games that you used to pretty much all be able to watch over the air for free. And it got me thinking about this other conversation I was having about how people prefer to watch games now, because there's an argument to be made, and you don't see this a ton with, obviously you don't see it at all with the major sports because they have the TV contracts, but you'll see it with like the Omaha Supernovas this year put on a bunch of their games on YouTube, or you'll see it with college, some smaller colleges or high school stuff where you'll see a lot of stuff on YouTube in terms of live streaming. And for me, I would almost, if you've got a quality broadcast on YouTube, I would almost prefer that, even not cost withstanding, just in terms of the ease of finding things. It's a lot easier to just go to YouTube and be able to find your broadcast than it is figuring out which streaming service everything was on. And I just started wondering if there may not be more of that in the future where people sort of just do their own broadcast, sort of like you see with radio networks sometimes where, like the Huskers radio network kind of does their own thing. You've got a lot of people that do that internally and just sort of make their own money off of whether it's probably obviously not your main revenue sports like football and basketball, but it makes me wonder if you're going to start seeing more of like, hey, we don't necessarily want to deal with whether it's, all these digital networks on the specific conferences, or you got to go find ESPN Plus or whatever. I mean, it's a heck of a lot easier to go to YouTube than it is to find whatever you're looking for on ESPN Plus. And I don't know. I think it's
then you're probably already set up on YouTube with your account and
100%.
everything. I mean, it's just right there. It's in one place. You're good to go compared to the other where you might have like 4 or 5 different streaming services you can go to. Do you already have an account? Is it something that's already set up? Is it something that you have to buy, or is it something you're going to get for,
And ESPN Plus it can be like pretty difficult to navigate. Like it's not always super intuitive. So that's something that if they're going to continue to put stuff on there, they probably need to sort that out and make it a little bit more user friendly than it has been. Whereas, YouTube is super user friendly, is for me. I think that's something we might start seeing a little bit more. on the YouTube chat, going back to something we just talked about, Ken says Dallas fans are just Texas fans that graduated. That's pretty accurate, I think. I think that's a fairly reasonable take. And obviously you got the locational overlap there, but yeah, I'll just be interested to see as we move into, because I do think, as we're, and I think it kind of goes into the stadium talk a little bit and just how we consume sports in general now is, I do think there's a little bit of fatigue, or there will be some fatigue in terms of, okay, I have to have 8 different streaming platforms to be able to watch NFL games on a Sunday, or, I know people got super frustrated with, having to download or subscribe to Peacock to watch Nebraska football or Nebraska basketball over the course of the season. And they do it, but at a certain point, I kind of to what Sam was talking about earlier with people actually donating money and going to games and stuff like that, I do think there is a point of fatigue where, at some point people just aren't going to do it anymore. And I don't know what that point is. With the NFL, you're probably a really long way away from that point, which is why they're able to, I guess, test their fans so much with like, hey, we're going to put 2 games on Netflix and we're going to put, 12 games on Amazon Prime or whatever.
Well, and it's not as easy to bounce around too.
Like that's the hard. Honestly, that
when
might
there's
be the worst part.
multiple games going on at once, and you want to bounce back and forth, whether it be halftime during one, you want to go over to another game, or if something exciting is happening and you want to go check it out. It's just you gotta. I mean, it's multiple steps just to go do that, and then to get back to what you want.
Yeah, it is. It's really difficult to, and that's a good point, Shane. It's really difficult to sort of channel hop between games the way you used to, and it honestly, it either forces you to have multiple TV set up, which I usually do just because of the job that we do here, but either that or like I rely on NFL Red Zone super heavily during the NFL season because it gets you to a bunch of the games and gets you to what's relevant happening in a way that is really difficult to do with either Sunday Ticket or hopping from, okay, I'm on Fox here, and then I got to go to Sunday Ticket, and then I got to go to Netflix, and then I go to Amazon Prime, or whatever it is. It's really not user-friendly to try and switch between. And, it's not practical to have like 8 TVs going. I'll sometimes run 3 or 4, and that's about all I can justify, and I do this for a living. So you're continuing, again, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Nebraska fans and the stadium. You're continuing to ask more and more of your consumer, and you're not really giving them anything in return. Like, if you're not, like, the NFL product hasn't changed. You're just getting charged more to watch it, right? It used to be pretty much, okay, every game that you were able to watch was either on Fox or CBS or NBC. Those were the main ones. And then you had 1 game a week on ESPN. So if you didn't have cable, you were only missing 1 game a week. And then you have Sunday Ticket come in and you're able to watch all the games. And that's a value add, right? You can watch whatever games and you pay a subscription for it. But now you're taking games that were free over the air, and now they're going to be on Netflix, or now they're going to be on Amazon Prime, or now they're going to be on Peacock or whatever. And the product hasn't changed at all. The product hasn't, like, you're not getting anything more than you were before. It's just before you didn't have to pay for it. Now you do. And that to me is kind of where this becomes long-term, might become an issue. And I don't, again, not that anybody's going to stop watching the NFL anytime soon. I get that. But this is a more sports in general conversation, is as teams continue to try and monetize, teams continue to try and get the most out of their revenue so that they can't afford to keep buying the best players and doing whatever else they need to do and being profitable. You're asking for people to pay way more for essentially the same product. And that's kind of where I come into this issue with Memorial Stadium is, like, yes, the renovations would be helpful. They would help certain things. The seat backs versus the bleachers are a good upgrade. And, trying to do whatever I don't even know what they're going to do with South Stadium. Like, that's a problem that they still don't seem to have figured out. So I don't expect me to figure it out either. But there's only so much you can do in a 100-year-old stadium, is my point. And the cost is still going to be astronomical, as Travis said. Whether you build new, renovate, whatever, it's an astronomical price tag that's coming along with it. At least with a new stadium, you're getting something tangible and noticeably more for that astronomical price tag, whereas
probably helps for recruiting too.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a brand new stadium, you've got all the amenities and stuff like that, much like the football building, like there's something to be said for having a brand new stadium. And I get the history's cool of Memorial Stadium. I don't know if you could, preserve the facade or something and incorporate that into the new one somehow, but you're asking a lot of people to pay a lot of money for a product that will not be dramatically different from what they're currently experiencing in a renovated Memorial Stadium. And that's a tough sell to me. It's a sell they might be able to make, especially if they start winning games. But that, to me, between that and the financial component where, you're starting to get, as I said, past that halfway point, I don't know that it's crazy just to at least explore all options at hand here, because there is a point where, like Sam said, there is a point where you're going to be asking too much of fans and not giving them enough in return. Whether that's wins, whether that's stadium amenities, whether that's beer, I don't, whatever it is, at some point you have to give them something back. And Nebraska needs to figure out what that is. Whatever the ask is, whatever the solution is, Nebraska has to figure out how to give some things back to their fans.
You know what I'll take? I'll take the beer. I'll take the wins. I'll take the extra concerts. I'll take the extra events. Bring in a monster truck rally, like Sam said. I'll take all of that.
That's Shane here. He wants the new stadium. That's what I heard. Shane wants the new stadium. No, at some point you have to figure out how to give something back to the fans when you continue to ask things from them. And again, most fans would just take the wins, and that's okay. Like I'm not arguing against that. If that's all it takes to get whatever renovations you need done and $500 million and whatever, like, go for it. But as we've learned around here, wins aren't guaranteed by any stretch of the imagination. And even though I am a firm believer in what Coach Rule's got going on and what he's doing, there's no guarantees there. And so if you're Troy Dannon and the University of Nebraska, you're placing a huge bet on the fact that Nebraska is able to get this thing going again. And
that's fine.
Maybe that's the bet you have to make. You bet on yourselves and live with the results.
I'll get after it pretty quickly.
You bet on yourselves and live with the results. That's something, I'm okay with that. But you have to understand that's what you're doing. You can't do that with any misconceptions about what's going on here. You're basically betting like, hey, we got to win 8 or 9 football games over the next couple years each. Otherwise, this thing's probably not getting off the ground, and we're going to be stuck with a 100-year-old stadium that is going to, at some point, need serious work just to remain viable at all. That's going to be the interesting thing about this. All right, coming up next, we will have more Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. I'm Ravi Lulla. That's Shane Schilberg. We'll be back.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're also on KFOR in Lincoln for this third hour. I'm Ravi Lulla. Shane Schillerberg helped me hold it down here today. If you weren't listening earlier, DB called in. He'll be back tomorrow. He had to get Caleb down to Lincoln this morning because Coach Rule, for the second weekend in a row, decided to disrupt DB's weekend plans, and they texted him and said, hey, is there any chance we can get Caleb down here a little early? And so they got things arranged for him to get down there today so that he can start practice a little bit earlier. Basically, it ends up by going in today instead of June 1st. It gives him an entire month's worth of practice.
Well, and he's excited too, like Damon said.
He is. He's excited.
And I think good for him.
He's excited for it. And I think the difference is, so you have to be enrolled in order to start participating. So he could have moved in June 1st, but I think that next session of summer classes wasn't until June 13th. And so he wouldn't have been able to fully participate until June 13th as it is. He starts basically today with the other summer session of classes. So
some of these turnarounds that we've seen, well, with like this situation, and then like with Caitlin Clark, as in she was just drafted, next thing she knows she's playing. I mean, some of these turnarounds,
they're pretty quick
nowadays, are just super quick.
Yeah, the WNBA draft is actually like the turnaround from college basketball season to WNBA season is super fast. They don't get a ton of time off, and so it's going to be a long year for all those rookies, as it always is. But it's also, I think, in that specific situation, Shane, I actually think it's really advantageous because you've got all the momentum from Caitlin Clark's college season, and you don't go 6 months without hearing about her.
Oh, and losing that.
And lose the momentum, and it's just all of a
Which
sudden
you
like,
probably wouldn't with her, but you might with another player.
I mean, you still might some. I mean, there would still be hype for her coming into the WNBA, but it's a lot fresher in our minds, her at Iowa and being kind of that dynamic player. It's just a lot fresher in our minds, and I think that probably helps out the WNBA in trying to get
that makes sense,
some momentum there. So in that instance, I actually do think it's beneficial, but it's gonna be a long year for her and for all of her fellow rookies like Angel Reese and a bunch of those other players that got drafted and are now already playing their WNBA season. We're less than, for Caitlin Clark, the Final Four was 6 weeks ago. I mean, it's a pretty quick turnaround there for her. So, but no, with Caleb, he'll be going.
I wish I would have had my turnaround like that coming out of college and getting a job. It took me a lot longer than that.
Just 6 weeks, ready to go.
Yeah, 6 weeks, ready to go.
Well, and Caitlin Clark's making a little bit better money than you too, so I think.
Yeah, probably.
People forget she's still going to make all that endorsement money, even though she's in the WNBA now. So that's why DB's not here. He's down getting Caleb set up in Lincoln, and it was a pretty cool. And he said I could share this earlier when we were talking, but it was a pretty cool kind of exchange that he shared with me about kind of Caleb's thought process and maturity through this. Is because the coaching staff gave him an option. They're like, hey, you can wait till June 1 if you want to. We'd really love to get you down here, on Monday to get things started. And so DB and Caleb are kind of talking to each other about it. And so we just asked him, he goes, hey, it's up to you, like whatever you want to do. And Caleb said basically like, hey, 6 months ago, I would have said, let's just wait till June 1st, but I'm ready to go. Let's do this thing. And he gave DB a lot of credit for kind of helping him through that process. And my response to him was like, hey, that's really good self-awareness right there, because that's not something you see a lot of from anybody really, but especially not from, people that are 18 years old, is kind of having the wherewithal to understand, like, yeah, 6 months ago, I probably wasn't ready for this. And recognizing that in yourself is I think, a really important step along the way. And I'm not just saying this because he's DB's kid. Just being around Caleb a little bit, he's a guy that's going to fit in really well with Coach Rule and that staff. He's a super low maintenance guy. He is extremely self-aware, like in that story I just mentioned about him understanding that 6 months ago he wouldn't have been ready for this. And he's a guy that I think fits into what they're trying to do in the defensive backfield in a real way as well. And I said this to DB, and I said it on air earlier. I genuinely believe that the reason they're doing this is because they think he can play right away. It's 100% where my mind went as soon as Damon told me about what was happening. Was, they think he can play right away. They want the extra month with him. And so you look at what that means, and I started thinking, okay, you've got Malcolm Hartzog, who they moved back to safety, and I think are going to have to move back over to corner to make sure they've got some depth at the corner spot. Even though Bly Hill looks like he's going to be ready for the fall, you're going to want some depth there and some options there at the corner spot. And, you've got some guys like Ethan Nation and guys like that are haven't had nearly as much experience as like a Malcolm Hartzog does. And that means you're going to have a spot open in that safety rotation. And if you look at the way Caleb's built, the way he likes to play, and then you look at the guys in those safety spots, whether it's Gifford or Hartzog, especially, those are the guys that I kind of gravitate towards a little bit in terms of his build. And if you watched Caleb play at all in high school, that's a dude that likes to hit people. He comes down with some bad intentions and really delivers in the run game, is also really good in coverage. I think he had 6 interceptions this year or something like that. Like he's capable of both, but the physicality that he brings to that safety spot, I think, is something that Nebraska could use right away. And, as DB said earlier, he's touching 200 pounds now. He's physically sounds like he's going to be ready to kind of take on that role. I think it'll be really interesting to see that. I think it'll be really interesting to see the impact that Caleb's able to have right away. Because I do think I looked at him as a special teamer right away because he's a nut job and enjoys returning punts like his dad did. Like there's a handful of things people do in sports that you have to be absolutely unhinged to want to do, and returning punts is one of them. You're looking straight up in the air, knowing that you got like 8 to 10 guys like bearing down on you, and you have no idea where they are, and you have to secure that punt, get your eyes down, and make decisions right away. It's absolutely psycho behavior to want to return punts. And it must run in the family because Damon did it and Caleb enjoys doing it. And he's really good at it, by the way, also. So that's where I thought Caleb would end up playing early, was on special teams. But I wouldn't be surprised with the way things are progressing there if he ends up getting in on defense as well as a true freshman. I think they really like what they see from him, and not just from a physical standpoint as a football player, I think from a makeup standpoint as well, which is kind of probably the most underrated part about playing early is what your makeup is like. And I know for a fact that his makeup is right in line with what Coach Rule, Coach Cooper, and all those guys are looking for, Coach White, in terms of guys that are playing early. That's a guy you're not going to have to babysit Caleb. You're not going to have to hold his hand. He's gonna be low maintenance. He's gonna do what he's told and get in there and get in the weight room and get his nutrition with Kristen Coggin and be just ready to go. So I'm excited for him. I'm excited for the whole family. I know it's a tough day for DB as he kind of processes through a lot of those emotions, and that's something I just can't relate to even a little bit. And I'm not really going to try to, because obviously without kids, that's not something I'm ever going to probably have any sort of frame of reference for outside of when I moved to college myself. And I certainly wasn't going anywhere early because somebody wanted me to play a sport. They kind of just let me on the basketball team because, because I was there. So it's certainly a different circumstance than anything I've ever experienced. But I'm glad he was able to be able to take the time and go down there with Caleb and the family and get that all sorted out. And he will be back tomorrow. So don't worry about that. And I'm sure he'll have some strong takes for me on my stadium, my new stadium plan, which I think, Shane, you sound like you were on board for.
Hey, if you give me beer, concerts, more wins.
What about
monster trucks?
Hear me out. I know you do seem like a monster truck guy. Hear me out. What if we just build a casino as part of the stadium?
You give me a casino?
Warhorse Memorial Stadium. I like it. I think we might have a little product placement here. We might be able to work it out.
Can we have a giant concourse too, just to wrap it all the way around?
Yes, let's have an actual real concourse too, because that's not modern technology, but it'd be novel for Nebraska football. Coming up next, we'll wrap up the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
You've seen this putt, Trevor, today. What does it do?
Not too much. Coming back up the hill. This is the moment you dream of as a kid.
You've practiced it as a kid thousands and thousands of times, telling yourself it was for this very occasion. To win it all.
Sander with victory at Valhalla.
Wrapping up the show here on a Monday on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. I'm Ravi Lulla. That's Shane producing for me and helping me stay on track this morning as we're flying solo. DB will be back tomorrow after he drops Caleb off in Lincoln, as I'm sure many Nebraska fans are excited to hear. He's getting off to an early start. Wanted to do a little bit of cleanup here. Obviously, you had Xander Schauffele winning the PGA Championship. Big day for him. Finally gets over the hump there in terms of getting that major, and was really, really good throughout the tournament. And I don't know if it was quite wire to wire. I know he was tied with Murakami for a while there, and but he was pretty much at the top of the leaderboard all 4 days. So incredible effort there from Xander.
It was interesting. It got interesting there for a little bit. And one thing on that play-by-play cut, that's not the moment that you're dreaming. I mean, you're dreaming of winning the Masters. That's what you're dreaming of winning. You're not dreaming of winning the PGA. Maybe the Open before that, one of the Opens before that. I mean, this would probably be like 4.
Yeah, I mean, PGA.
So later in the week, maybe you're dreaming about that.
PGA Championship is definitely the least appealing of the 4 majors,
and it's probably because of where it was at originally on the schedule. Instead of being now
because it used to be like late August, right?
Yeah,
it was the 4th one. It was late, and then I think did they move it with COVID?
Yes.
Okay, so now it's earlier in the season, but it's got the least amount of history. It's got the least amount of kind of like pageantry and prestige and all that kind of stuff, and so you kind of understand it's not the it's not the sexy major the way like the Masters or even I think the Opens, the US and the British, the Open Championship as they like to call it. I think those are not in the same category as the Masters, but they're close. The Masters,
they're closer than the PGA.
Oh, for sure. The Masters gets all the appeal because of Augusta, right? Like it's the same spot every year. Whereas since the Opens are floating around the way the PGA is, but they just have so much history that it's a little bit different. But I tell you what, though, Xander's not going to put any asterisks next to him being a major winner now because it's the PGA. He's going to embrace that thing fully. So,
well, the Masters is always more dramatic. I mean, it's just the nature of that course. It's the nature of that event. It's the nature of that whole week. It's just more dramatic, and it's been that way for the last 40 years.
It really has.
Comparably.
Xander Schauffele had 9 top 10 finishes more than that. He's had 12 top 10 finishes in the major tournaments over the last 7 years. Finally broke through to get that first one in at the PGA Championship there. So it may not be as sexy for the rest of us, but I'm sure he's pretty pumped about it. Cleaning up some of the YouTube comments. We were talking about television packages and things like that. Amazing Daniel says the 4-screen split helps with all the stuff on YouTube TV. It for sure does. I will say, and I'm sure the YouTube TV executives are watching, give me the ability to change what games are on the quad box. That's all I need. I don't need it preset. Just let me choose what games are in my quad box. I would give you all of my money. Let me choose which 4 games it is. That's all. That's not a big ask. If it's on YouTube TV, just let me choose the 4 games. That's all I'm asking. You could charge me a premium. I don't care. Let me choose my quad box.
That
games.
seems a little bit more of a simpler request than what I've been requesting. More beer, more concerts, more wins.
It's easier than a brand new stadium for sure. Speaking of stadium, Will chimes in, says, what does an off-campus stadium do to student attendance? Which we kind of addressed earlier. This is already a struggle at many schools, becoming a struggle to get kids to games here. Moving it from walking distance makes it that much tougher. And I agree, but my answer is kind of in there already, Will, and that's if you're already struggling to get students when it is just a walk away for them to go, is it possible that that's not the demographic you're going after anymore? Because, again, they're not bringing a ton of revenue the way – because, A, their tickets are cheaper. B, they don't have any licensing fees and all that kind of stuff to generate additional income. They're probably not spending nearly as much inside the stadium as other people are because, sometimes they're tailgating or whatever beforehand. They're not spending that kind of money in there. I wonder if at some point the students do not become the primary focus of what is needed for the stadium. They're already kind of an afterthought, and I just don't know again, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish here, right? Financially, I don't know what the value is of catering to students, except if you're just trying to think long term and say, hey, we've got we're trying to get these people to become lifelong fans, and that's a valid argument. But from a right now money standpoint, catering to the people with the least amount of money doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, but the students bring a college atmosphere, though.
Well, so if you want to keep the college atmosphere, that's a different conversation than the financial aspect. If your goal is to keep the college atmosphere, yes, you need to figure out a way to cater to the students. If you're just trying to be financially viable, the other options make way more sense. Anthony says the atmosphere of the student section brings all the reasons to cater. I get it. I do. But they don't bring a lot of money to the table. Maybe someday they will. Maybe long-term they will. I get that. But with the direction college football is going, college football more than anything else, I get college basketball kind of dabbles in this end of the pool as well. But I don't know how long-term you're looking at if you're looking at, hey, let's keep a college atmosphere. And you're right, Anthony, 35-plus crowd is not creating crowd advantages. I would argue
You can always bring that back, though.
You can. And also, go to other places. Nebraska's atmosphere is not really it's a great crowd, but it's not as hostile as some of these other places. You go to Wisconsin, you go to Colorado, is super hostile and not in a good way. You go to Autzen Stadium in Oregon. You go to a bunch of these places that have hostile environments. That's not what Nebraska is, right? They might still have a home field advantage, but the home field advantage was the team more than the actual crowd. And the crowd can get into it, and I'm not disparaging that at all. But it's not really that hostile environment that you think of when you think of a home field advantage. I really don't think that's the primary concern. Now, if you're talking about creating lifelong Husker fans, then yes, the students do become a concern. My concern is the long-term financial viability may get pushed down the road a little bit for short-term financial viability. And you maybe you're thinking, hey, by the time these guys are 30, 35, 40, and they've got real money, they'll get reinvested back in to the university and the football program anyway. That's where you kind of have to decide, okay, what return on the investment am I getting by making this the best student atmosphere possible, the best college atmosphere possible? And those are things that are really hard to weigh because you don't necessarily have tangible and quantifiable things to weigh that against. It's a tricky proposition to cater to a section of the fan base that doesn't directly drive revenue. And indirectly, absolutely. Long term, absolutely. But if you don't survive financially over the next 10 to 20 years, then there's nothing to invest in long term with those students and that next generation of fans. And Travis is right. You're not anywhere without the alumni. I get that. So there is a certain part of you that do have to cater to that. But again, if you're not financially viable for the next 10 to 20 years, when all this is going to shake out, there's not going to be a football program or an athletic department or anything that there is to invest in if you're a student now.
Is that even reasonable?
What do you mean?
If they continued down the path that they're continuing down right now, as in what they had been for the last 10 years, and it just keeps getting, worse and worse. I mean,
yeah, if they don't win, like Sam was saying, if they don't win in the next 5 to 7 years, like Nebraska as their opportunity to be one of the big boys of college football may pass it by. Like they have to start winning. That's the full stop. And that to be fair, that's going to change.
That sounds eye-opening.
Well, and that's going to make everything else work, right? Whether it's the students having to transport to games, whether it's on campus and not having the amenities and renovating Memorial Stadium instead of building new. Winning fixes everything, right? Everybody's willing to sacrifice certain things if you're successful. The only reason we're having this conversation is because they haven't been successful on the field in too long.
extra concerts fix everything too.
I don't think extra concerts do fix everything, but I do appreciate the passion. Maybe they can get Kiss in there for you, Shano. We'll have more Hurrdat Sports Radio tomorrow. DB will be back.